Kenneth Walker III is the back to roster in Seattle. That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde. My co-host, Chris Allen, is on assignment today, so we will be discussing that and much more today on our show. So let's jump right into the discussion with Kenneth Walker and Rashad Penny. So I see both sides of the argument, and to be certain, Kenneth Walker is more valuable currently than Rashad Penny. But even at the discount, I could see people wanting to say, well, I think that Rashad Penny might get 20 touches a game, as been reported with multiple Seattle beat reporters. So I'm going to take the discount and I'm going to roster Rashad Penny in Dynasty. He just got the new contract, still relatively young. If you want to say that the injuries have extended his her career, maybe in that he hasn't played a lot of games even in year one when he was relatively healthy, then maybe you could make that case for yourself, but you would be stretching it in that case. Rashad Penny, even in year one, he played 14 games, and the Seattle Seahawks weren't really willing to give him any touches. He had about 85, I believe, and Chris Carson, the sixth rounder, was actually just an utter workhorse in that year. There was really no excuse for it. There's really no reason to bring along your rookie running back. In fact, that's one of their prime years, right? We don't have many prime years for running backs, and that's kind of why their contracts are going down. It's actually really sad to see, and you're starting to see more committee backfields because those early years are just so crucial for running backs. So when you spent your early years, first year behind Chris Carson. And then the next year, unfortunately, the injury started. Rashad Penny only played in 10 games. Then his third year, he only played in 4 games. And then last year, he was injured actually a large portion of the year as well. But when Rashad Penny did get back healthy last year, he won leagues. And this fantasy and NFL is really, what have you done for me recently? So Rashad Penny recently won people fantasy leagues. And that's why Rashad Penny is holding a lot of value right now. Best ball, especially, he's being drafted ahead of Kenneth Walker. I believe my rankings reflect Kenneth Walker ahead of Rashad Penny, even in year one. And then in Dynasty, Rashad Penny is not quite as highly valued as Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker, typically the 102 in most formats. Some people want to take the wide receiver of choice, like Garrett Wilson's my favorite wide receiver in the class, but he's third behind Kenneth Walker. So Kenneth Walker being valued at the 102, yeah, that's a little more rich than what Rashad Penny's going for, and most of that is due to the age factor. So back to the Rashad Penny conversation. He's being projected by some of the beat reporters, not multiple beat reporters. So I can't cite which ones are doing a good job. I mean, it's being reported in multiple places that Rashad Penny can expect to get 20 carries a game. Now, I do believe that the injury prone label should be handled sparsely. For example, Keenan Allen was never injury prone, right? He had some freak injuries. I think one of them was an appendix or a kidney that ruptured. So he never deserved the injury prone label, but he got it. And a lot of guys in the NFL get injury prone labels. It's a brutal sport. You're not injury prone just because you had some bad injury luck. However, Rashad Penny has had continuous lower body soft tissue injuries. That is a problem at running back. So if you're like me and you're not a doctor, I'm not a doctor. Now we just talk about what kind of makes sense. Does it make more sense that in year 5, Rashad Penny is healthy for a full season and carries, the ball 20 times a game? Or does it make more sense that he probably follows the track that he had the last 4 years and he deals with soft tissue injuries throughout the year? I'd like to mention that he has already had a hamstring injury in this offseason. It's been considered minor. He's already been back to full workouts. However, we just got to minicamp and we already had an injury for Rashad Penny, right? So that's the negative. The positive is the 6.3 yards per carry last year. Again, league winning upside. So if you want to say that his ADP is fair enough to be worth that league winning upside that he could potentially get you, Totally fine. That's not the route that I'm going to take. However, I would rather pay up, get Kenneth Walker, and expect him to end up taking over the backfield, whether it be through just being flat out better than Rashad Penny, or unfortunately through injury if Rashad Penny can't hold it together another year with the lower body soft tissue injuries. I know if you've listened to the Audible preseason watch list on YouTube, the show has not been released on your listening apps yet. But if you listen to that show, Sig and Cecil talked about James Cook. They talked about James Cook potentially being the type of player who demands a larger role in the offense. And typically that's what happens with these rookies, especially at running back. They come in kind of a mystery card and they end up demanding their workload. It's not really the type of situation where head coaches have an idea of, I want Kenneth Walker to have 12 touches a game in his first year, or I want James Cook to have 5 targets a game in his first year. It's just going to be at running back. It's kind of like we're going to roll with the guys we have. And then if we can get something out of our rookie, that's going to make us happy. So in that situation in Buffalo, you have James Cook that could be demanding our role ahead of Devin Singletary, right? Well, we have the same thing in Seattle, and the ADPs are relatively similar. I mean, Kenneth Walker's going everywhere from 102 to 104, and James Cook is going all the way up at 106. So very similar situations. And Kenneth Walker may just demand more workload. He had 1,600 yards on like 260 carries last year for Michigan State. Unfortunately, he didn't meet the threshold for catches that I would prefer, at least like 20 plus. I think he had 16, something like that in his last year at Michigan State. So it's not quite what we're looking for in the receiving game. We're hoping that was a product of his offense and that when he gets to the NFL, he can get those checkdowns from probably Drew Lock. Since Drew Lock's probably not going to be pushing the ball down the field. I mean, he will. He certainly has an arm for pushing it down the field, but I just don't know if Pete Carroll is going to let either of these quarterbacks in Geno Smith or Drew Lock actually play quarterback. I think whoever goes out there is going to be asked to hand the ball off, do a lot of play action, maybe some deep shots, but I think there's going to be a lot of dump offs. There's going to be a lot of opportunity in the screen game. Now let's go to the flip side. And first, let me mention Kenneth Walker already also had a soft tissue injury, also hamstring, also doing fine currently. So I'm not going to be biased to either side. Now, Kenneth Walker, he could be more involved in the passing game, but the Seattle Seahawks aren't really interested in having like the passing down back and the early down back. So it really comes down to, can Kenneth Walker at his floor with Rashad Penny having a good season still be productive in his rookie season? To that, I would say yes, because Seattle is going to absolutely rank top 5, probably top 3, maybe top 1 in rushing offense. They will have to have a word with the Baltimore Ravens if they want that number 1 spot, but it will certainly be close. So even if we have Rashad Penny play for a full season, which he has not done, even come close to in his first 4 years in the league, then we could still see Kenneth Walker reaching value. And if Kenneth Walker and Rashad Penny have the same production in year 1, you still got a net positive, right? Because you're getting 3 years younger with Kenneth Walker and you're getting a rookie on a rookie deal. Now, Rashad Penny did just get a new contract with Seattle. That was more out of necessity because unfortunately, I don't have anything to back this up. I just personally do not believe that we will see Chris Carson play football ever again. That's very unfortunate with that neck injury. He's had disc fusion. So that just looks really bad. I don't know if anyone out there has seen the x-ray. Again, not a doctor. I mean, that his neck could look great from a doctor's perspective, but me, the regular person, that looks like something that would be very, very difficult to play, one of the most violent sports known to man. So I don't think that we see Chris Carson this year, maybe ever again. That's very unfortunate. So Rashad Penny did get signed to a 2-year deal. That doesn't necessarily mean he needs to be there next year, but also that just means that if he is there, Kenneth Walker could, as said earlier, just demand more touches or play due to injury. So you can't say that Rashad Penny's definitely going to get injured and Kenneth Walker is definitely not going to get injured. What you can say is Kenneth Walker is younger. Kenneth Walker, in my opinion, is more talented than Rashad Penny is in going into his fifth year as someone who has not played a lot of football at all. And so I'm just going to roll with Kenneth Walker with the price increase because, of course, Rashad Penny has a lower ADP. So with that, we're going to go on to the conversation that I brought in a little bit earlier with James Cook. James Cook is going to be playing with Devin Singletary. Now, their ADPs in best ball, and I bring up best ball a lot on the Dynasty show because in-season values are always going to start affecting Dynasty values, always. Because at the end of the day, we all care about scoring points, and it's about to be point scoring season. So, for 4, 5, 6 months out of the year, you're going to get this weird fusion between Dynasty and best ball and redraft, and even the young guys that we project to take some time. Let's say Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is a good example of somebody who we have in high regards right now. If Alec Pierce were to do absolutely nothing for, let's say, the first 4 weeks, his dynasty ADP will drop for certain. Even though we all know that Alec Pierce is a second round pick as I wouldn't necessarily call Alec Pierce a project, but as somebody who is not quite refined into, being able to play in an NFL offense, he will probably lose value just because he didn't produce right away. Heck, even Justin Jefferson had a terrible, terrible first 2 games, like really bad first 2 games. He was being projected to play behind BC and ends up having one of the best rookie seasons ever after terrible first 2 games. I guarantee that people made panic trades with Justin Jefferson. So, with all that being said, that's why you're going to hear in the future shows that we're going to probably bring some of the dynasty conversation in with the best ball, with the redraft. Back to James Cook and Devin Singletary. Their ADPs are relatively similar in best ball right now, and that's because people just don't really know what you're going to get out of the two of them. Devin Singletary was somebody who down the stretch last year was also super helpful for fantasy teams and also helped people in fantasy championships, and that's why his ADP is reflecting basically a positive light on him. However, he was not much of an upside play at any point in his career, and even last year, for a large portion of the year, he was not, because Josh Allen was taking a lot of rushing production away from Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. And then Zach Moss ended up just really not cutting it. So then Matt Breida started doing some productive things for the team. Of course, everybody knows that the Buffalo Bills tried to get J.D. McKissick. In the final hour, J.D. McKissick goes back to Washington. So that leaves a hole. I kind of like that we can project a role for James Cook just because J.D. McKissick was supposed to come there. We know what J.D. McKissick does, and we know what J.D. McKissick doesn't do. So it's nice to project a little floor because we can say, well, I know what J.D. McKissick would have done in this offense, so I know what James Cook is going to do in this offense. Well, I would say that's James Cook's floor. I actually think James Cook right now is more talented than Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary was a third-round pick at the time, and he definitely had holes in his game. So it's not that crazy to believe that James Cook, as a talented second-round pick, could end up being the better back day one of camp, day one of the season, throughout the preseason. James Cook could be the better back. So James Cook at a 106 value right now, especially when we need those rookie running backs, that's not bad for James Cook. I mean, I did have him behind Sky Moore for a while, and I bumped him up to 106. He was my 107 for a lot of this offseason, and I really think it's not going to be hard to see James Cook as the third most valuable player in this draft. I mean, we could see in this loaded wide receiver draft, we could still end up easily seeing 3 running backs being the top values in this class, being Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and then James Cook. So you could have pretty much the same conversation that I started the show with Rashad Penny and with Kenneth Walker. You could have with Devin Singletary and James Cook. I just think that James Cook has a lot more upside than Devin Singletary. I do believe that James Cook can be productive on early downs. I don't think it's rational to say, though, that you will see Devin Singletary take a backseat on early downs early in the season, because there's just not a lot of reason for it. Devin Singletary has familiarity with Josh Allen. So you'll see Devin Singletary have an early role in the offense and throughout probably the first half of the season. But down the stretch where we really need it, I do believe that James Cook can be one of those guys that really propels you in the playoffs and ends up taking on a huge role. And let's also add to the conversation, because we hear a lot that Josh Allen takes all the goal line touches, and he does, and he's huge, and he's very good around the 5-10 yard line. That does not mean that that's what the Bills would like to do. That means that's what they have had to do with Devin Singletary and with Zach Moss and Matt Breida. You haven't had they haven't had LeGarrette Blount back there, right? So what are they going to do? They're going to rush Josh Allen. But don't you think that they would prefer to protect the best quarterback in the league right now in Josh Allen by giving it to someone else, anyone else? So if James Cook can produce between the tackles and be a real red zone threat, I believe he carves himself a way bigger role than what we are projecting. So with that being said, before we get to our last topic, just remember that we are coming to you from the newsletter from Footballguys. Comes to you from Joe Bryant, Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Bloom, and they send that email directly to your inbox with all the news and notes that you need from around the league. Even in July, they're still hitting you with content on a pretty much daily basis. So make sure that you subscribe to that, because Chris and I take information from there and we bring it over here to talk to you about how that news is dynasty relevant. The last thing we're going to discuss is Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold in the open quarterback competition. Something we talked about on the show last week is that if you felt like Baker Mayfield was going to have a career resurgence, and there's a lot of things that you can point to, and that wasn't Baker Mayfield's fault. Now, a lot of it was his fault, but there are things that were not Baker Mayfield's fault. Part of that is being 4 offensive coordinators in his first 5 years. I mean, his first 4 years, sorry. And so he hasn't really had a time to get a foothold. We've seen some sparks from him, right? So if you believe all of those things, then Baker Mayfield is not the value that he was before he was traded in terms of dynasty value, but he's still a value. So we are getting an opportunity here to where you still might be able to squeak out a little bit of buy early on Baker Mayfield if that is what you believe in, because there is an open quarterback competition. And I suppose I'll submit the other side of the argument. If you believe that Sam Darnold still has some juice, he will be making, I think, $18 million this year to ride the bench, in my opinion. But if you think Sam Darnold may win the job, you still have a buying opportunity on Sam Darnold. I'd argue you have a huge buying opportunity on Sam Darnold in your super flex and your 2 QB leagues. Sam Darnold is so young that he will still have value. He will still be on rosters. He will never in his career hit your waiver wires, I do not believe. He'll be one of those Case Keenum backups who is always on a roster. So in both cases, this quarterback competition may present a little bit of value where someone says, look, I made it this far with Baker Mayfield. I'm going to get a little bit of price boost from Baker Mayfield signing with the Panthers. Let me just get out on him now in case he loses the starting job to Sam Darnold. And that's a fair argument for them to make. And you could end up acquiring Baker Mayfield for your roster for still cheaper than what he would be in season when he's producing, which I do believe he will. I do think it's a little bit of a boost for TJ Moore, a little bit of a boost for Robbie Anderson. So if you're a believer in Baker Mayfield, now is the time to try to go trade for him. And let me just reiterate the dynasty philosophy that I discussed a little bit last week, in that just because you didn't buy a player at their floor, and I hate to use such I guess, harsh term for humans, but sorry, this is the way I think about it, kind of like the stock market. And you didn't get Baker Mayfield when he was at his floor, when everything was looking doom and gloom in Cleveland, but you still have a lot ceiling there where you could acquire Baker Mayfield via trade right now, and come week 5, he's already increased his value immensely. So that all that being said, you can still do the same thing with Sam Darnold. I could make the same argument. Sam Darnold's even probably cheaper than he will be when he's in that Case Keenum tier, because Case Keenum still always held some decent value. I know in a lot of leagues, Case Keenum, whenever he would get into a position where he needs to start for a period of games, whether it be as a bridge quarterback for Washington or when he comes in for the Vikings and is their starter, you're really usually trading a guy like that for like a late second round pick. So that's still value, and that's more than what you would get for Sam Darnold right now. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you all for coming out for the show. We'll have Chris with me next week, and we're really getting into the season. So please like, subscribe, rate, review, and remember, we will be on our own podcast feed. All of the shows from Football Guys will be on their own feed, so we will be off the Audible feed. Make sure that you're subscribing to all Football Guys shows, and we will catch y'all next time.